Hi, this is Steve Belber, writer and director of What We Do Next, and I'm here today with Christina Compton, who whose lived experience has parallels, I think, with some of the movies. So we were excited to talk with you, Christina, and thank you for doing this. And maybe if you could just start with sort of talking about Volunteers of America and the group and how your interactions with it came about and what your association with it is.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So Volunteers of America has been around for over 125 years. We are a human services organization that operates across Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, Clark, and Floyd County, so across 4 states. We have over 50 comprehensive programs, but some of our larger ones, of course, are our substance and recovery support, housing support, and veteran services. I became connected with Volunteers of America through their Freedom House program. And that is a nationally recognized model to treat substance use disorder in pregnant and parenting women. They use evidence-based clinical services to combat not only substance use, but also like the underlying issues. We use trauma-informed care. It's a real holistic approach. So instead of just looking at the individual, in my case, right, the woman, I was looked at like the family unit as a whole. So I was not the only one receiving treatment. My whole family was getting better together with me. Freedom House's goal is to end the cycle of addiction and end the cycle of trauma, which, we know that increased trauma, especially at an early childhood age, increases the likelihood of substance misuse later on in life. So, the sooner that we can stop that cycle and future trauma for the babies that these moms are taking care of, the better. We're just trying to save the world one baby at a time. But so I found myself incarcerated, pregnant with my youngest son. I have 3 kiddos. And I was sentenced to serve a 5-year sentence, pregnant with Wyatt is his name. Thankfully, I had some interactions with an alternative sentencing worker. She was a social worker. We presented this idea for an alternative sentence that would release me from incarceration into a treatment center that would accommodate my pregnancy and then my parenting afterwards. Freedom House was that treatment center. So thankfully, I was released on shock probation, out of prison, out of a state penitentiary, into the Freedom House program. And actually, I arrived at Freedom House 7 days before I gave birth to my child. So 7 days from, having a child incarcerated, which, that was a big deal for me. So that was how I originally became connected to Volunteers of America. And then after I graduated treatment, I remained in their aftercare service for probably 2 years or so. Within that time frame, I obtained a peer support certification. It's a state licensure that allows me to perform non-clinical therapeutic services. So it's like that peer-to-peer connection. So individuals know that they're not alone. Just so happened, Volunteers of America was having a job fair right after I took my certification. So I felt like, this is, take heed to ominous warnings I had always heard. So let's see, this is just what it's supposed to be. So I arrived at the job fair, not sure if I had passed my certification exam or not. Started working, complete entry level as a therapist technician, recovery support technician, and then I've been with VOA for over 4 years now, and I've been promoted a few times. So as it stands now, I'm the admissions manager for all of our addiction recovery services. So super, super proud about that. I'm also a social work student. So hopefully I'm in the middle of my last semester to obtain my bachelor's. So June of this year, I should be a degreed woman, which is, a big thing to someone like me. So
That's an amazing. That's truly what a journey, and what a organization to. I'm curious. The parallels to this movie in New York City. It's very different than Kentucky, obviously, but there do seem to be some overlaps, and I think that's something that we are really hoping our movie can can speak to everybody, not just a woman, Puerto Rican descent in New York or whoever. So tell me, if you would, like, obviously the character in the movie is dealing with a lot of trauma, and doesn't get the kind of help that you eventually did get. And can you just talk a little bit about how you saw Elsa's character, and where you, if at all, you identified with some of that?
Oh yeah, yeah. I identified with Elsa a whole lot. Down to the trauma, the abuse, the wanting to being torn between not wanting to be separated from siblings to wanting to protect them, down to like longing and missing the abuser. I mean, there's so much trauma and different types of trauma, and all throughout different stages of life in my background. And again, trauma is, I see so much of that on the day-to-day, professionally and personally. I don't know how an individual couldn't identify with a traumatic experience happening in their life, even if it wasn't the same type, and then the incarceration, man, I remember being locked up, and I went up for parole. And I think I was set to give birth in about 8 weeks at that time. And I went up for parole, and I was really banking like, okay, this is the ticket out where I'm not going to have my child locked up. And I got flopped on my parole, I think 12 months, which to me was like a guarantee that I'm not going to keep this baby. And, also in my background, I had some CPS interaction and lost custody of my older 2 children. And, if I had lost my youngest, I would have took my life. I was in a space where mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I couldn't lose another child. I knew that I was not gonna make it through that. I didn't have the will or the want to make it through that. The only hope that I had was, this little baby that I was carrying, and a whole lot of uncertainty on what was going to happen with him, what was going to happen with me. So that desperation and that fear of going back there, because just like parole on shock, you walk a very, very tight line. And sometimes it doesn't matter if you're in the right or in the wrong. You have to go sit down and explain that to a group of people whenever they have time to meet with you. And that's not going to be before you have to report to your next day's shift. So, and it's a real dark place to be. Very dark place to be.
That's unimaginable for most people, I think. Were there any services in prison that you could turn to prior to meeting up with Volunteers of America? Was there any resources you had access to?
So it has been several years since I've been incarcerated, and I will say that I think our state is doing better now than they were then. But I will also say that I don't think that we're doing enough. But so whenever I was in prison, we had a substance abuse program at SAP, MRT. We had Alcoholics Anonymous meetings come in. There were various programs, but the thing with those programs is your security level has to be a certain part. You can't have any infractions. You have to go on a waiting list, or you have to see the parole board, and the parole board has to recommend it for you, because this is, you wanting to do this program and someone being someone being told they have to do this program to get out, they're going to take precedent over someone that's really trying to help. And unfortunately, the correction system is not set up for true rehabilitation. So you get into this cycle of recidivism, and it's hard to get out of it. And it's hard to break those labels that are placed on you. It's real hard.
I can imagine. Do you feel like you had any ability or time or knowledge, really, because so few of us have any knowledge of how to cope with the underlying trauma that was causing the addiction? In your case, did you have any internal like ability to cope with it, or programming beyond just treating the cosmetic sort of addiction that was going on?
So prior to coming into Volunteers of America, I had been in many treatment centers. And what I think was the difference at Volunteers of America versus the other treatment centers was that look at the trauma. Because it's, if I can treat my substance use disorder. In fact, the only thing I honestly have to do to treat my substance use disorder is to stop using. And then it goes into remission. But what doesn't change is your mental, the obsession, the compulsion, the fixation, the like, it's so incredibly intense, like the feeling inside of you that says you have to do this thing that is going to destroy you and destroy your family, but you have to do this. If you don't get down to like what causes that, then you're going to be in this cycle, this pendulum, right, of recovery and relapse and recovery and relapse. But with adding in the clinical services and addressing my trauma, I could have never have done that on my own, because I was experiencing trauma and like and being triggered by things that I wasn't even aware had impacted me. Thought things that I thought that I had processed, that I had been through, that, I had masked, and legitimately like things in my early childhood that I really didn't even remember. But like partnering with a clinician and working through those things. And, for a while I was seeing a psychiatrist also. And I needed a lot of help. And fortunately, Volunteers of America was an agency that was able to provide all of that help. Again, not only to myself, but to my children as well.
Incredible. And it's true. You used the word trigger, and obviously in this movie we see Elsa being triggered, and her addiction in a way is almost rage or anger or the inability to contain, her emotions a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about reentry? I mean, luckily it seems like you had Volunteers of America by the time you were exited from the system. But can you talk about what is required of individual strength to deal with what must be a hugely daunting process of coming back out, knowing that temptation is out there, knowing that you still might be triggered by anyone because of the underlying problems?
I know incarceration is a whole beast in itself. Like when we talk about the trauma, like that itself is a whole nother experience. But I will say that it's an experience that never ever leaves you. It never leaves you. And for me, the fear of returning has never left me either. Now, thankfully, I've put in some work and I've turned these like negative stressors into like positive stress. So like, I'm not going back to prison today. Let me buckle my seatbelt. It's like, but so thankfully, I've had the opportunity to navigate my life in a way where that's not a potential for me. But even though it's not a realistic potential, it's still a very real fear. It's first coming out is it's so different. Down to, in our county jail, whenever I was frequenting, the sinks didn't have like a turn thing, so you pressed a button. So when the water was off, it just turned off on its own. When I first came home, I would walk out of the room and realize that the water was still running because I was so conditioned to hit the button, and it's small things like that you don't think about. Or I would go to the grocery store and then come home and like put my food up, and like my grocery list looks like I was shopping off of Canteen, because you just get so conditioned and routine that it's hard to break that. And then, it's not exactly an environment where it's safe for you to be vulnerable, or it's safe for you to be a free thinker, to bounce ideas off of one another, or to advocate for yourself, let alone someone else. So you're taught not to be that way. But then whenever you enter into the world, you're supposed to know, oh, let me dress up and go to a job interview. Let me go get an ID. Let me talk to this landlord. Let me advocate to probation and parole to, do whatever. That's not realistic because you've been conditioned not to want anything except for, your meal and your shower for the day. Don't ask for anything else. And so it's an adjustment, and there's not enough services, and it's the service is there, but the need is so high. There's so many incarcerated individuals. I mean, I'm sure those they've got to be swamped.
Yeah.
Which, just like every other social worker, especially, I know for sure in Louisville, all of the social workers have way too much work on their plate. There's just not enough.
You see that everywhere. It's true.
Yeah.
In our film, we see Elsa definitely, I think, very scared of going back, willing to do almost anything not to go back, and that speaks to what you're talking to. And I wonder sometimes about the word agency for her character, and whether someone might watch this movie and think, oh, she should just get her act together and stop blackmailing people or leveraging her power. And how did you feel watching that? Did you feel like, Elsa, get a grip, or were you, or did you understand that she was desperate not to go back? Or, and it sounds like a loaded question, but it's really answer as you wish.
Elsa did exactly, in my opinion, Elsa did exactly what any individual would have done in her position with the tools that she had. She utilized her resources. I honestly feel that Elsa was harmed very, very early by a person that was supposed to be credentialed and protected, and then she was reharmed again once, for a politician to save face. So I mean, she was honestly doing what she was taught by the professionals and the individuals that were supposed to be helping and supporting and doing that. And that wasn't, from the outside looking in, they could say, yeah, she was connected with this agency and she was receiving these services, and this tragic thing happened, right? This freak accident, no one could have predicted it. That's not factual. That's not real. And then, as I don't know about New York, but here, we have mandated reporting, and that, abuse of a child, especially sexual abuse, should have been reported. There was a lot of missed intervention for Elsa. And what saddens me is that is a lot of women's stories, especially women that are not Caucasian. The services and pathways to help are not handed out in an equitable way. And unfortunately, it's women like Elsa that fall by the wayside because they're seen as dispensable, So yeah, that's I feel like she played her resources, the ones that she felt she had, in the best way that she could, whether that was right or wrong on a moral standard. I can't say that I would have done anything different.
That's interesting to hear. Yeah. I know you didn't serve twice, but can you imagine what going back might have been like for a character like that? What it does to your hope, your and to the tools that the tools that you do have if you're stripped of your freedom again.
Um, going back, man, thankfully that has not been my experience. But to think about that like that, and especially to go from, so you get out, you get a job, you start becoming, successful, you're able to help your family, you're re-engaging in relationships, you have friendships, you're, enjoying your life. And then to find out that all of that can be taken away and you're completely powerless and you have no say-so, no defense. And then, when you're working with therapists and you're working on yourself, you pick up these tools, right? These coping skills, and you start to obtain this like emotional maturity and this self-awareness. And you start to operate with individuals in a healthy way, instead of like, that I just want to take like how I have to, the survival thing. So instead, so you go from this survival mindset whenever you're incarcerated, and then you have the opportunity to come out and do something different and thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And then to have that stripped away and have to go back to that survival, it's almost worse because now you know how good it can be. Because Elsa was incarcerated at a very, very young age. She probably didn't experience much adult life, maybe adult-esque because of, her situation, but real deal adult privileges and freedoms and income and all of those things that come with that, helping her brother and, being able to do those things that fulfill you emotionally and spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
And then to know that all of that's going to be ripped from you again. And then to have an out date also, like, okay, I'm going to go and this is the day that I'm going to leave. And to keep obtaining more time and more time and more time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty bleak. Are there parole preparation programs? I mean, it sounds like VOA does that a little bit, gets in there and helps you prepare for your parole hearing, so that you really go in there with every advantage that is available.
Unfortunately, we do not have access to them we don't have access to incarcerated individuals prior to their parole board hearing. And I know that there's a process there to prepare for the parole board, but I'm not 100% certain what that process was. I didn't they sent me an email on like the little kiosk thing and let me know, yeah, you're going to hang out with us for a while longer. But so I didn't get to meet with them face to face, or, there was no rapport. They literally saw me on paper, my charges, and made a decision based off of that.
So would that have been helpful, I assume, or if there was more intervention available to these services like where you work now to get in there early?
Yeah. Elsa, so the parole process is different for different people. I don't know what makes the difference. I know that some individuals get like a parole board hearing. They get to actually sit down and go and meet the parole board and present themselves. Again, that wasn't my experience, but I know that can be an experience. But I would imagine that Elsa probably went up for parole a couple of times and was told, okay, you need to do this, that, and the other, because typically when you're not granted parole, they give you a plan. Okay, so you didn't get released now, but we would like you to take parenting classes, job training, go to substance abuse program. And once you complete all of these programs, then we can reevaluate at your next parole board hearing.
Gotcha.
But so if I would love for VOA to get into, I would spear the way for VOA to get into the prisons and the jails and help people get to the help that they really need, because I don't think that I'm not saying that I don't think individuals should be held accountable, but there's more to that. Also, I feel like they should also be held accountable to make sure that they're healthy and addressing, mental health and other things to not only keep themselves safe, but our community also.
Absolutely. That's part of it. You're right. Well, let's end with one last plug for VOA. Can you just describe, it's a national program, I assume? Is it in all major cities? Is it everywhere? And if people wanted to, even donate to it, like give me the best plug for what it does best and what it can do.
So VOA is all over the country. We are VOA mid-state, so we operate out of the 4 states, which is Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, Clark and Floyd counties in Indiana. We are, of course, a nonprofit organization, and the donation process, I'm not 100% certain, but our website is voamid.org. And you can see all of, some amazing stories, maybe even my own, and see some of the work that we're doing, not only, in the local Louisville community, but all over the country.
It's amazing. I encourage people to give. It sounds like it's done amazing, that you're doing work for others now in an amazing way. And this was very enlightening for me personally to sort of understand how universal an issue this is. I was sort of focused on the New York aspect of it, but to hear the overlaps with your experience is amazing. I cannot thank you enough, Christina. This is great. Thank you.
Thank you.